Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 5 of Oh God, It Hurts!
Oh God, it hurts!
As you can hear with me, as always, is my co-host, GameAgentET, live from Osaka. How are you, Mr. Tang?
I'm doing great, Mr. Six Button Samurai, aka JJJ, hailing from Tucson, Arizona.
It's true.
Yep.
Out here in the 520. Enjoying the
the-
desert,
Yep.
enjoying what passes for winter, which is to say highs of 73, lows of 48.
That sounds pretty nice.
Yes.
Here in Osaka, it's a little bit chilly.
Yeah.
About maybe 50, 60 degrees.
Right on.
But
gotta have a sweet hoodie.
Yeah, it's hoodie weather. I got my Parappa hoodie on. It's pretty dope. Ready to rock.
Yes.
It has been quite a bit of time since we've been on cast that, is semi-current, right?
Yeah. I mean, you and I recorded the first 4 episodes of Oh God, It Hurts in the span of about a month when we were just sort of trying to hammer out the format, this, that, and the other. And of course, we're going to continue sort of shaping it and doing some funny things with it. But, needless to say, it's been an awesome and fun experience thus far, especially working with all of our cohorts at the Ruminations radio network.
Lovely network.
Yeah,
I've been listening to a lot of the podcasts from RRN because
nice.
Just trying to get into this podcasting scene. As you know, Oh God, It Hurts is my first time being on a podcast, and I wanted to see what was out there. And I didn't really go very far. We have a lot of great shows that are on this network, and I highly recommend them. Like my favorite right now is probably Brevity Box.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3 cats are so cool, man. They just talk it up about casual life and just what's going on, and it also includes video games. So yeah, I'm
Nice.
enjoying the
I would
hell out of
also
that
throw
cast.
a similarly large shout out to our buddy Optimus and his cast, Retro Futurist
Yep.
Culture.
Love his show too. Yeah.
Yeah. There were so many things that he and I were all up into way back when, and it's really fascinating to see his evolution as like a thinking adult diving back into that well, but just having so much more, bringing so much more to the table on those subjects, because obviously like he's a relentlessly curious person, so he's continued to sort of pick those things apart and try to understand the what, the why, and the who, and all of that. And
he does a
that's
great job.
He does, and that's really the spirit upon which these shows are built. So
yeah, we have a great variety of shows. We have a lot of good content, a lot of thought-provoking content that, it's just really fun to listen to. Makes you think really hard about some things in life, things that we enjoy in culture. Just, it's all good humor as well. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to jump into the water cooler segment and sort of talk about things that are percolating on the video game news side and otherwise. You and I had touched on this a little bit before, but it became a lot more of a topic for discussion in the meantime, and that is the Nintendo's online service expansion.
Yep.
And there's definitely some mixed feelings involved.
There is quite a bit. Yeah. They didn't do quite a good job with the emulation initially, from what I understand. A lot of people have been tweeting about how some of the games have glitches, don't work as well as they did in the original, and also some incompatibilities with the built-in, N64 controller? Well, basically, if you're a Nintendo's, Switch Online, I guess if you're on the service, there's like some sort of membership.
Mhm.
If you are part of the membership, you can buy controllers, to use for the NSO, including a Nintendo 64 controller, right?
Right.
And this thing has a built-in rumble pack, from what I understand. And even
Mhm.
with this built-in rumble pack, there are some games that do not recognize the compatibility, from what I understand, with the
So it's
rumble
like
pack.
the emulation wasn't fully fleshed out in order to interface with this controller
Yeah.
as you would expect from playing, like, the same game on an original N64.
Yeah, and it's kinda shocking that they didn't really check that if that was true. I mean, I can't confirm because I don't have the controller yet, nor do I have the service. We'll talk about that later, but yeah. Uh, but it's surprising that a lot of these issues came about, and yeah, it's a little disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, their track record to this point is absolutely spotty.
I agree.
Um, if you already like the N64 and the Sega Genesis games are on the next tier of subscription beyond just the basic one, which gives you access to NES and Super NES games to this point. And the
Yep.
thing is, with both of those systems, it was like pretty big initial offering of titles, like a lot of the classics that you would absolutely expect to have access to. And then a little bit of a release afterwards, another
Yeah,
little
the
release, and then
the
just
the the Nintendo drip feed that they're most famous for, unfortunately.
right.
Yeah, painful.
Um,
It's like water torture,
well,
literal
that's the
water
thing.
torture.
And I mean, I'm certainly not, you know, it's been a long time since like the 16-bit System Wars.
Yep.
And in that time, like, actually, to be perfectly realistic about it, even in that time, like, I owned more than one console because, damn it, there were too many good games for everything in that time.
Yeah, no
And I
sense
still
sticking to one
fundamentally
system.
believe, yeah, and I believe that we're pretty much in the same boat today.
Exactly.
But that said, when you look at the offering from Nintendo and you look at, say, what Microsoft offers on Game Pass, now
Yeah,
granted, those are two completely different pricing structures. Game Pass, obviously, much, much more expensive per month.
yeah,
But in terms of just like the level of expected features, even in just like a network functionality sense, the Nintendo stuff is still incredibly lacking, you
yeah,
know?
and you don't have that sense of value. You feel
No, you
like
really don't.
you feel like, "Why am I paying for this?" Half
Yeah.
the time. Whereas,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't have an Xbox. I used to have a 360 and the original Xbox, but could you explain to us, how much, Game Pass is in terms of price and value?
Yeah. So you can just get like what used to be called like the Xbox Gold subscription,
Yeah,
which just enables you to have like your online feature set unlocked and all the basic network functionality. That's still, I want to say it's still like $60 a year.
yes,
But then the Game Pass subscription specifically is about $15 a month, but that gets you this fairly large curated library of digital games that you can access and play as yours every month. And of course, some games slide into the service, some games slide out of the service. Most of the really big Microsoft titles, like your Forza Horizons, your Halo, that sort of thing, that's all just going to be a part of that pass all the time. So
that
it's a
sound
really interesting and intense value proposition. I
th
personally think it's worth it. Um,
Yeah,
and the
it
the
does
thing is
sound
the
like
network features are still just light years ahead of what's happening with Nintendo Online service.
Get this, you could probably chat with your friends during the
Oh,
game without,
what?
having a
Without your
smartphone or
phone?
a yeah, dude, that's oh, man. What
See,
time am I living in?
right. I don't to this day, I truly cannot understand why, like, Nintendo is obviously a very strict traditional Japanese company,
Yeah.
and chances are, like, if the technology wasn't made there, conceived there first, they're probably somewhat averse to utilizing it.
They do kinda live in a cave in terms of getting with the times and certain things, yeah. I mean, they're brilliant in some things, but way, way behind in others.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I still maintain that, like, as developers of what is like a $60 SKU now, when they put together a really big, franchise flagship title, your Super Mario Odyssey, your Breath of the Wild, those are still among the most value packed games in existence. They're fantastic and they're worth every single penny. But there's just this whole middle range of services that the other hardware manufacturers have figured out how to deliver very well. And they just still, like, you can just tell it's still really not a priority for them.
It is not, and although they put in some effort, obviously getting the Sega Genesis Mega Drive library into the NSO is quite a feat in itself. At the same time, it's kind of a questionable type of act. Like, why did you do this when you're not really, you know, going full forward with it? You're kinda
Right.
going half speed with it.
Hmm.
Why can't you just say, "Hey, we got this. Let's keep running. Let's run full speed ahead. We'll offer all these titles off the bat, and instead of drip feeding it, we'll just keep adding more and more, or God forbid, have all of them all at once from the beginning," you know?
Right.
Not
See, we've talked about this before, and it still just feels like such a wasted opportunity
it is.
for them to put forth, like, the best possible subscription gaming service there is. Because
Yeah.
if you think about it, like, almost the entire tradition of great Japanese gaming franchises as we have known them to this point, they all spawned from that period of the NES and the Super NES. And that's still, I think, something that has tremendous mind share, particularly in the minds of a lot of older players, ourselves included. So I don't understand why, for the life of me, they didn't look upon that and try to rip it down with both hands. You know what I mean? Like, they should have been the ones to establish the Netflix for retro gaming, and however that would bridge into their present day library.
Yeah. I mean, it it's kind of disheartening because you also look at how they actually were probably one of the major forces of mini retro consoles, like when they brought out their miniature NES and Super
Hmm.
NES,
Hmm.
people bought it like hotcakes. And that should
Yep.
have been a huge light bulb saying, hey, we can use these retro titles from our past libraries and market them really well in our current Nintendo Switch.
Right.
And let's change the way we do things and have it so that, as I mentioned before, have it so it's like Netflix where you have all the titles available
Hmm.
and you can play it whenever you want. Uh, sure, you might have to be online. That's fine, but it would make the service much more worth it than leaving people in the dark wondering, oh, is my favorite title from Nintendo 64 gonna show up? Or, is it gonna be emulated fairly well, or is it just gonna be like a slipshod version of it that
Hmm.
runs slow and, you know, has lag, input
Yeah.
lag because it's not emulated correctly, so
Hmm.
it's quite disappointing.
Yeah. No, I really wish they'd. I really wish they'd get their shit together on this particular front because it is kind of consistently disappointing watching that
They need to
happen as
hire
it goes
someone.
forward.
They need to
Yeah,
hire
I mean,
someone
I think
quick
that
with
much
the
is clear.
quickness.
Like, they need somebody in the hierarchy there that understands that space and is actually passionate about expanding Nintendo's particular share of that space. Because right now, like, uh, I would say they're just getting run over on that front.
Yeah, it's surprising.
And it also makes no friggin' sense when you consider the established user base that they have with the Nintendo Switch right now. Like, it
And I
just feels
think
like they're missing out on something enormous.
yeah, and it'll be telling what the figures are in the months to come because I think for the time being, a lot of people are just getting the basic service just to play online games like people who like Smash or people who like Splatoon.
Or
They're
Animal
gonna
Crossing.
yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
But is the worth there when you're paying an extra what? I don't know how much it is in the US, but here in Japan, I think it goes from 2,000 to 5,000 yen a year.
Right.
So, is it
Here
worth the
it's roughly
cost?
the same. It goes from like $20 a year to $50 a year if you want that expanded tier that includes N64, Genesis, and the Animal Crossing DLC.
Yeah,
Which is
and
also weird. It's also profoundly weird to me to like you wouldn't give your users a choice of what that DLC would be. Like, you're
yeah,
just offering the one thing, and I would imagine there's probably some sort of market research underlying that. Like, they just said, okay, there are this many active Animal Crossing users. Let's just bundle it with that. But at the same time, like, it feels goofy that if you were somebody that never plays Animal Crossing, you're basically buying a piece of DLC that you will never use.
exactly. Um, if they could think a little bit out of the box, why don't you add other games DLC packages inside this upgraded NSO? Like, hey, why not add in the Breath of the Wild DLC package if people don't have it? There you
Right.
go.
Yeah.
And other DLC packages that are in, popular Nintendo games like Splatoon 2, their Octo expansion,
Hmm.
throw that in.
Yeah. I mean, any of
Then
those or all the DLC for Mario Kart, like,
yep,
you could have at least like five robust choices for people.
yeah. And
So,
if they quit, then, well, you lose that stuff, but hey, it's at least a little bit more incentive to stay on or to upgrade.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I agree very much so.
Yeah.
Um,
2 steps
so
forward, 1 step back.
pretty much. But that is what it is. Nintendo's
That's
gonna Nintendo, and
that's so Nintendo.
yep, they're not likely to change anytime soon.
Oh.
Um, One interesting phenomenon that I wanted to talk about a little bit. There's this whole new realm of re-releases that have come about from companies like Limited Run Games, Retrobit, Columbus Circle. Um, do you have any of these games in your collection, or what's your feeling
No,
about these?
no, I don't, but,
Yeah.
there are a couple that I played that, are part of that whole re-release list, and
Hmm.
I think it's a great idea because, geez, I mean, it's the same in the US, but anytime I go to Super Potato, which is a used, video game store around Japan, especially in Tokyo and Osaka,
Hmm.
I would see these carts, go for close to $1,000 US dollars just
Hmm.
to buy this game.
Right.
but now they're having these replicated carts where you can buy it again. They'll have manuals and everything complete
Mhm.
in box, but it's only 6,000 yen, 7,000 yen.
Right, it's just the price of, like, a regular retail release.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea because
Yeah.
gives another opportunity for people to buy it. It gives another generation an opportunity to play it for the first time, and even people, yeah, who love the game ever since it came out. Yeah, they'll double dip because to support, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, there is a little bit of a warning. I'll mention this real quick. I think some people are familiar with Super Double Dragon, aka Return of Double Dragon for the
Oh,
Super
yes.
Famicom.
Mhm.
That was released by Retroism, re-released, I should say. And with that game, unfortunately, they had a little bit of an oversight where they didn't realize that these replicated cards, which are officially licensed, I believe, by Technos, they do not work with the first generation Super Nintendo consoles that have, I believe, 2 chips. That's
Ouch.
what people were mentioning.
Mhm.
So in the beginning, they marketed it as, "Oh, it'll work with NES, NES," and then later on, they retracted saying, we have a big warning. If you have an original NES, don't get this."
Wow.
So
So
do
on
be
an
careful.
original on the original run of Super Famicoms, that will not run.
Super Nintendo systems because it was released in North American territories.
Okay.
They
Wow.
also re-released it in Japan, but I don't know if there are any issues with Famicoms running Return of Double Dragon replicated carts in Japan made by, for Japanese audiences. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, other than that, I think it's great as long as it works.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is you end up finding that, like, with a lot of these new school retro console releases, there's a lot of strange little problems that can happen. There was another one for the Genesis slash Mega Drive called Demons of Astaborg,
Yeah.
and apparently that game had an issue where the first run of cartridges were not the edges of the carts were not beveled properly,
Oh,
and so, like, it would work, but there were a lot of red flags raised about what that might mean for, like, long-term wear and tear on people's systems, especially considering the fact that, these systems are all, like, 30 years old now, so
yeah, and you don't want to wreck your retro gaming
exactly.
system. So
Yeah.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
Um, and
So I
since
don't know, it's an interesting thing, and I can understand, like, the desire to have, like, a brand new, like, real cartridge to feed your real piece of hardware. But at the
uh,
same time, like, it also reveals, like, how many pitfalls there are associated with that kind of manufacturing.
yeah, I mean because they're obviously not using the original specs, so
Right.
uh I guess the best thing to say is don't buy it day 1.
Yeah.
Definitely look at the reviews on Amazon and Reddit.
Mhm.
Check to see if there's anything going on with compatibility issues or any sort of, yeah,
And there's a lot of way to
potential.
support those games now too, because typically now with a lot of them, if you make that purchase, they'll also offer you a digital copy, so you can get, like, a legit ROM to run on whatever else it is you're into. Like, if it's an analog console with jailbroken firmware or the Mr. FPGA, like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways to play those things now. So, like, if you've kind of got cold feet about it, like, you could try a game out that way by, like, buying the ROM. And then if it turns out you really dig it and you end up wanting a copy, you could sort of sidestep that initial
Yeah.
pre-order process and just wait to make sure that, you know, people have gotten theirs and it's actually going to wind up working the way it should.
But I like that option because if you get the ROM and you
Hmm.
enjoy the game, then you might
Yeah.
decide, "Oh, I'll get the physical copy, but, it'll be just for collection."
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of players are actually opting for that now. Where, like, they buy the game and, it's just going up on the shelf anyway. And
Yeah.
then the active use of it will come from the ROM or the, digital copy for Switch or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
cool. There's more ways to play than ever, and that's always exciting.
I love it when there's always options. That's
Yeah,
always my deal. So
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I think it's a good
So
thing.
absolutely. So we're going to take a 10-second break right now so you can hear from some of our other compadres here on the Ruminations Radio Network.
The year is 2043. You're playing
fantasy football. It is championship week. You're trying to set your lineup and you don't know what to do.
Robert Griffin IV and his top target, Will Fuller VI, have carried you all season, but they're facing a London Jaguars team that has the top defense in the league. Your other quarterback is a 66-year-old Tom Brady who's playing against the much more manageable Toronto Bengals. So you turn to Nick
and Elijah of the 25 Yards Later podcast, a production of Sports Obsessive and Ruminations Radio Network. Be a champion.
Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. Woo!
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey, hey.
Hey, hey.
So, Eddie, what are you playing right now?
Oh, yeah. Well, I know this is Thanksgiving, but the game I played recently, I didn't feel so thankful of.
It was a bit of a turkey?
Yeah, not the delicious kind, unfortunately. I know some people have varying opinions, but here's what I recently played. It was a game that is a take on a classic title, very classic title, Atari classic, Centipede.
Okay.
So they made a new version called Centipede Recharged.
And what platform was this on?
You can get this on Switch, and I believe it's also on PS4, PC, and I believe Xbox, the newest Xbox systems. So
okay.
But yes, when I played this game, for the first time when I was young, yeah, it was totally fun. Just very hectic, very frantic type of game. It was definitely one of the best trackball games ever made.
Yes.
Is probably one of my sister's one of her favorite games too.
And I would chime in and say that that's really a game that doesn't especially work any other way with the trackball.
Yeah.
Without the trackball?
Yeah. So
is that what you found here?
Well, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what really killed it for me was the fact that this game, when you play it, the main game, you only have one life.
Oof.
You do not have a collection of lives like in the previous game, which that was part of the fun. You try to get a high score, you try to outlast yourself, your old high scores, and it was pretty frantic because there was a enemy, the spider, which was very quick, very unpredictable.
Yeah.
And
you bum rush your shit.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be on a run and then suddenly, the spider got on a run and would kill you, take 3 of your lives in one stage, But in this game, the spider is a lot slower.
Oh.
And, well, it's kinda understandable because of the fact that it's only one life. But at the same time, that frantic pace is kinda not really there anymore. So
yeah, it just sounds like the rhythm of that game would completely fall apart with just one life.
Yeah, and, in addition to that, there's a lot of power-ups now. So that changes the dynamic completely.
Right.
So, I'll give it another day in court sometime, but
Yeah.
my first take is, nah.
That's
No
too
way.
bad.
Yeah.
Isn't there also an Asteroids Recharged on the way?
That's coming out soon, and Black Widow Recharged came out, last month near Halloween.
Wow,
And
that's a deep.
unfortunately, I love Black Widow back in the day.
Right, I remember that cabinet as well.
Yeah, Twin Sticks. Gotta love those games. But
Right.
yeah,
And vector
this
graphics,
Yep,
of course. Yep.
yep. But this game, I heard, only has 1 life as well.
Oof.
And yeah, I'm not a big fan of that.
See, and by contrast, I'm going to talk about a game that you and I both love to pieces.
Yeah.
Um, when you talk about Pac-Man Championship Edition,
Yes.
that
Yes.
game's momentum is all about running your score up like crazy
Mhm.
and piling up the guys so that when you die, it's not so much the death that leaves you crippled moving forward.
Yeah.
It's because it costs you time and flow.
Yeah.
And it's that maddening break in the rhythm that makes you want to jump back in and have that kind of, that head of steam building up beneath you once again. And this is fresh in my brain right now because the game that I've been absolutely hooked on once again is that damn the Pac-Man Championship Edition demake for NES/Famicom.
Oh, yeah. It's a great demake. Yeah, if you
It's I mean, I'm one of those people that it's like I'm an old jaded gamer now.
Yeah.
When I hear something is great, I'm just like, well, let me see how it turns out. And with that, like, I was curious because I think you and I had pretty much agreed that Pac-Man Championship Edition was like our favorite edition of Pac-Man to this point
Yep, I agree.
because of its addictive qualities.
Yep. It's
And
solid.
yeah, but at the same time, like, it blows my mind just how much that 8-bit demake still manages to capture all of the things that make that. I mean, that was originally an Xbox 360 game. All of the things that make that game excellent, like, none of that was lost. But at the same time, you have this completely wonderful added layer of charm by having it be a version of that game that probably is fairly stressful on the Famicom/NES hardware.
From what I understand, it could run on a Famicom because it was built with those specs in mind.
Right. And that's like so impressive to me, the fact that they like limited themselves and did that as an in-house project that went out on that specific Namco collection for the
Yeah,
Switch. Like,
it's
that's
amazing.
amazing. Like,
Yeah.
it's just such a, I don't know, like, you have to really admire some of the stewardship that Namco has done with regard to Pac-Man. And that's one of the reasons you and I are really excited about the forthcoming Pac-Man
Oh,
Museum.
oh, Pac-Man Museum Plus, yes. When I heard
Hmm.
about that game coming out, early 2022.
Hmm.
Oh man, it's on. It's on.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll have leaderboards, but yeah,
Yeah.
I played that for months on my 360. It's just
Hmm.
a joy. Just laser focusing on getting a high score, having fun, getting frustrated, but in a good way.
Yep.
And it
And I know we're
was
also excited about
yeah.
finally getting a legitimate port of Pac-Man
Oh,
Arranged,
thank
which will also
God.
be on there.
Yes, we're talking about not the console version on the PSP, but the arcade one that was part of the Namco Collection Classics, I believe, part volume 2,
Hmm.
which also had Dig Dug arrangement and Rally X arrangement. Dig Dug
Yep.
arrangement was great as well. Rally X arrangement, eh.
Eh,
It was good, but eh,
yeah.
frustrating to play. But
Hmm.
yeah, Pac-Man arrangement, I remember playing it for the first time on my Game Boy Advance,
Yeah.
and oh my god, they did a great job with that. When I
Yep.
eventually saw it in the arcades, I was amazed at how well they, made the port. It was
Hmm.
just, I mean, the screen wasn't as big, obviously, it would pan around, but
Yep.
gameplay, sound-wise, everything. It felt like the
Yeah.
arcade, and I remember almost 1 CCing that game. I
Yeah.
almost did it. Almost
I
did it.
mean, shockingly accurate port considering the enormous hardware differences,
especially the sound chip.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, between the sound and the format of the screen, there are some huge hurdles. But thankfully, soon that will not be our only option of playing that game.
But yeah, you've been playing that as well, right? Pac-Man
Yeah.
Arrangement.
Yep. Been playing a little of that on GBA. I also have definitely been playing some more Quake, and also getting in some Forza Horizon 5, which, that's a very new school sort of driving game. And like, I'm traditionally much more of an arcade racing person. Like,
Ridge
anybody who knows me
Racer
knows that I love the Ridge Racer series.
Me too, man. You got me into Ridge Racer.
Yeah.
It's all because of you.
Well, I mean, we lucked out here. I mean, Tucson was never like first on the arcade circuit as far as like getting new things, but the biggest golf and stuff in town got a Ridge Racer cabinet, like a deluxe sit down one, very early in that game's life. And I remember the first day I laid eyes on that machine, I was just like, I need to play that a lot.
Yeah.
And I did. And, subsequently just about every iteration of that game. So while I hope in my heart of hearts for a Ridge Racer comeback at some point, I know 1UP's doing that cabinet. And
that looks pretty sweet, the arcade 1UP one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm skeptical about it until I see how good the emulation is, because like, that's not the most documented chipset in the history of the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? System 22 doesn't get anywhere near the kind of main development love that something like, Model 1 or Model 2 hardware from Sega has. So we'll see what comes of it. I hope it's cool.
Would you get it?
Hope it's not, so I can avoid buying it.
Would you get it? I want to ask the hard question. Would you get it?
Right. It would be tough to pass that up if it's really, really well done.
Do it.
I don't know.
Do it. Make me proud, brother.
I also don't have a lot of room for that kind of thing in my place.
It's not so big, dude. It's an arcade 1UP. It's like 3/4 of the size of a cabinet. Come on.
I'd have to ponder it, man. I have to invest some serious thought in that bad boy.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you're thankful for that's on the horizon, Ed? I know you were looking forward to the Pocky and Rocky remake, which I know got delayed.
Yeah, Natsumi Atari needed a little bit more, time in the oven for this game. And I don't mind at all because it looks excellent. And since we're talking about thanks, I'm very thankful for Natsumi Atari. I highly recommend their games. Yes. Wild Guns Reloaded.
If you haven't played Wild Guns Reloaded or
Ninja Warriors once again, or the Ninja Saviors, as we call it in North America, they do an exceptional job with making old games with a new twist. They still retain the sprites, but very updated. The gameplay.
It really is basically like your if you think about like the level of quality and polish and strictly adhering to the thing in the way that the folks that made Sonic Mania have gone about that game, you're really dealing with the same thing with Natsume Atari's titles.
It's the highest level you could ever achieve, in my opinion.
They're made with love. The sprite work is unbelievable. I mean, it really is like they basically just picked up in like 1996 with better hardware.
Well, yeah, because most, if not all of the original crew works on these games. So that's why they're that good. They're not another company or another hand-me-down project from the main company. So, yeah.
No, I think the Ninja Warriors, once again, is my favorite to this point.
It's mine as well. I play it from time to time. I played it last month, and I want to play it again because just in general, the gameplay is addictive. You would imagine, like, I mean, it's not your typical side scroll beat 'em up has like a what is it? A Z, a Y, and axis plane. I don't know the terminology, but you can move to and
Right,
from
it
the
doesn't have
foreground,
that
background.
3D depth the way Double Dragon or Final Fight do. All the fighting is on one plane.
But it's still
Yes,
amazing.
right.
It still
No, I mean,
works
it's
with
still
one
got
plane.
this unbelievable level of depth in terms of, like,
Yeah,
the setups and when enemies attack you and knowing, like, what they're likely to counter something with and how you can circumvent that, how
yeah.
you can use the entire screen.
And it's widescreen, so there's
Mhm.
a lot more real estate, but even the
Yeah.
original, I played it a little bit, and it
Mhm.
didn't feel as, as solid as this game. This game
Mhm.
upped it to the point where it's perfection, I think, and
Yeah.
definitely do yourself a service. Play some not to me Atari games. Do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Highly recommended.
Yep. Those are some of the absolute best retro remakes
Super
going right
thankful for
now.
them.
Yep. So yeah, no, I'm also whenever Pocky and Rocky shows up,
Day one,
I'll
man.
be gladly forking out for that.
Oh, yeah. Worth
Yeah.
every penny, worth every yen.
Yep. All right. So I think we whipped through the things that we are now playing right now.
Yep.
It's time to branch over into the big question.
Hoo-hoo. So
Now, you and I hadn't recorded in a couple of months, and we bandied about a variety of big questions, some of which we'll continue to kind of pick apart and present in future episodes. But I asked a few other people that I knew this question, and it really was the kind of thing that just like stops an old gamer in his tracks. It's like, wait, what? Oh. So, I'm going to present this.
Okay.
If you could only play one company's releases for the rest of your life, whose would they be? Now, this comes in two parts. Part one, it can be any company, including the console manufacturers. Part two, only third party companies that have never put out console hardware.
Oh,
So, Eddie,
yes.
if you could only play one company's releases for the rest of your life, whose would they be?
All right. Part A.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know my answer.
Yeah,
Nintendo.
of course.
Because in my life, they have had the most impactful games that really, really reached out to me and just grabbed me by the brain, shook it, and said, "Bro, this is how video games are. This
Mm-hmm.
this is how to live video games." And
Yeah.
it's a good life. I love it. I mean, ever since I played Donkey Kong, one of the first games I ever played in my life, up to now, just
Mm-hmm.
every time, well, I wouldn't say every time, but many times when I play Nintendo games, there's like this sense of like I'm a kid again when I see
Mm-hmm.
some things that I see in the games that nobody else has done. It makes me feel like just wow, like just for example, when I played Super Mario 3D Land,
Mm-hmm.
they did a lot of 3D tech that wasn't in any other 3D game on the 3DS at the time that just made it real fun, like, how they hid certain things in the background or foreground, and it kinda made it fun to discover where
Right.
things were, and then with Super Mario Odyssey, where there were some level designs and some enemies in the game where you would see how they would, react in the environment, and you were like, "Wow, that's really, really cool." I
Yeah.
I really feel like a kid again, just like discovery, new discoveries of things that you've never seen before. And now they're in this video game that you're enjoying, and that sets Nintendo apart from all the rest. And I'd be more than happy to play their games only their games from now until the end of time. They have
Mm-hmm.
a deep catalog, a lot of games that I have not played yet,
Yeah.
especially games like Custom Robo. I would love to try out their games someday. I'd like to get more into F-Zero because I played a little bit back in the day, but not as much as others. And
Yeah,
I would love to.
he means me.
I do mean him.
Uh-huh.
Because if it wasn't for James, I wouldn't really be into racing games, to be honest. That's why I like Ridge Racer so much. But yeah, when F-Zero came out, I wasn't really as into it as others. So, but yeah, I would love to play the F-Zero library again if I had
Yeah,
time. So that would
especially
be,
if they made it more available.
yeah, as if Nintendo would do something like that. Oh, well,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's like money. Who
Right.
wants money nowadays? Not
Well,
Nintendo.
okay, sidebar. Ed, have you ever seen the movie Mean Girls?
No. Why?
Okay. So, Mean Girls is the story of an outsider who, like, she's basically an exchange student. She winds up at this high school, and just by virtue of her looks, though she has absolutely no social vocabulary for the high school she walks into,
Yeah.
she winds up befriending both kind of the uncool kids and the super cool young ladies that are known as the plastics.
Nice
Now,
name.
within the plastics, there are a few different people, and one of them is always trying to make the word fetch like slang. Like, fetch is cool. Like, that's so fetch. And in some ways, like, that's become a long running meme where it's like, stop trying to make fetch happen. And in some ways, Nintendo is basically like 3D is their fetch. Like, they've been trying to make 3D this mainstream thing for so long. And, like, I mean, way back to like the Famicom glasses, right?
Yep.
Like,
And then it continued with the Virtual Boy, right?
uh-huh.
And then the
Or maybe
stereoscopic
that's not the best
3D.
verb for it. It
Yeah.
didn't really continue. It happened again. And then, oh.
Well, you know,
But it's sad though, because like with the 3DS, you probably had the most successful possible implementation of it because it was a passive thing that didn't require goggles. And particularly on the second run of hardware, it actually worked much, much better.
it did.
Like with the tracking.
Yeah.
And of
it
course,
did.
they would come up with a really interesting use for that kind of technology, particularly like in a Mario game. But like, it's almost unfair what they bring to the table creatively. You know what I mean? Because they're only going to be the ones that are going to exploit something weird like that and actually find the middle ground between like a tech feature and something fun. You know what I mean?
Something out of the
So,
ordinary besides having the 3D effects. They do something that, something that enhances the gameplay more than just
right.
having the effects. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Only they can do it,
Hmm.
but that's why I
Okay. So
love them.
your part one answer is Nintendo.
Yep.
What is your part two answer?
I
If you
think
could
you know
only
this
play
answer as
one
well.
company, yeah. All right. Bring it.
It's Capcom.
Okay.
And I will explain why.
All right.
Because I grew up playing games like in the arcade Final Fight, Black Tiger, Strider, Ghosts and Goblins, and
We've
seeing
had so
these
many
games.
conversations about Black Tiger
Yeah.
at Peter
That needs to
Piper.
be out again on current systems. I really wish Capcom Arcade Stadium would have that game.
Yeah,
Such a missed opportunity not to have that game. It's
it is. They failed
enjoyable,
you.
beautiful game. But
Yeah.
anyways, back in those days,
It's also the Magic Sword prequel for anybody that knows Magic Sword but does not know Black Tiger.
I did not know that.
Well,
That
I
is
mean,
news to
I
me.
don't know that it is in a literal story sense, but in terms of gameplay,
Well, I agree there, yeah.
yeah.
Definitely is.
Although Black Tiger is actually much more of a platformer than Magic Sword is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Magic Sword's very linear, I believe.
Yeah.
So, but yes, When these games came out in the arcade, I would say they were the pinnacle of things like graphics, music, sound, gameplay. They were
Yep.
just on top of everything.
I mean, CPS1 games, when they first appeared in arcades, when you first saw Strider or Ghouls and Ghosts
Yep.
or Forgotten Worlds, like all those games looked considerably better
Oh yeah.
than just about everything else appearing in arcades at the time, with the
And
exception of like some of Sega's 3D stuff.
yeah. And on top of that, I mean, you had the characters, the character designs, the
Hmm.
storylines, just everything was top
Hmm.
shelf. And
Yes.
that's why I love them back then. They also have many series that I love that are still going. Like
Hmm.
Ace Attorney. I'm a big fan of Ace Attorney. I
Yeah.
believe 20th anniversary this year.
Hmm.
Street Fighter, of course.
Yep.
Darkstalkers, Resident Evil, Mega Man.
Hmm.
Love those series. Uh, the current ones, they're still going, still doing pretty good.
Hmm.
And just like Nintendo, they have a nice backlog. So if I got bored of the current games or the previous games, like there's always a game that I would love to try.
Yeah.
And it would take me up to my dying day to play all those games in full.
Yep.
So that's why I choose them. They are also like Nintendo in terms of pioneering a lot of things back in the day. Uh,
Hmm.
especially with fighting games, with Street Fighter, Resident Evil, and before that, they had Sweet Home, which was probably one of the first horror genre games ever made
Yep.
for the Famicom.
Hmm.
So, and Final Fight, of course,
Yeah.
pioneering side scroll beat 'em ups. And
Hmm.
yeah, that would be my choice. And I would play Hyper Fighting or Super Street Fighter 2X anytime. No
Yeah.
problem. I would have a blast. And games I would like to play, Zack and Wiki, Rival Schools, Project Justice, Tech Romancer, Star Gladiator, list goes on.
Nice.
So many things. But yeah.
That was classy as fuck, Ed.
Thank you.
Seriously.
I prepped for that.
I can tell.
Thank you. Anyways,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on this? What are your companies?
So part one is really, really difficult for me.
Yeah.
I have very much the same feelings you do about Nintendo. And yet there are so many games that I've also loved, particularly on their own platforms from Sega.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been spending a lot of time with the Genesis / Mega Drive library lately. So I've also been motoring my way through Shining Force.
Yeah,
I
great
finished
series.
Phantasy Star 4, a couple months ago now.
Nice.
I don't know, it's tough because I think the thing that Sega brings to the table, perhaps a little more so than Nintendo, is just the sheer diversity of their offerings. That you not just had all these fantastic knuckle busting arcade titles, the things that they initially got famous for,
Yep.
the likes of
Shinobi.
Space Harrier, Shinobi,
Altered Beast for
Fantasy
me.
Zone. Yeah.
Not for you, but for me.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I love all those as well. But they've also done so many interesting takes on different genres in the home. Really deep, interesting JRPG games.
I still wanna
All
play
the
Skies of
shooters.
Skies of Arcadia. I still wanna
Skies
play
of
that game.
Arcadia is another one that I need to spend time with someday.
Panzer Saga.
Um, yeah. Oh, so good.
And they also innovated it as
And
well, like, the VMU for the Dreamcast, Visual Memory
yeah,
Unit, I believe that's what it is.
yeah,
That was awesome because if you think about it, that was, like, super early precursor of the Wii U.
yeah.
Screen
I mean,
screen, that's
the
separate.
capacity sucked.
Yeah, it
Like
did.
the fact that you could have like one sports game devour your entire VMU is terrible.
Yeah.
So there were some things about it that were not good in terms of execution, but like as an idea, like I remember talking about this with our mutual friend Sebastian,
Yes.
and one of the first things he was excited about was the fact that he could play one-on-one in his home playing a football game and could have that little screen to choose a play.
Yeah. It
Just
made a huge
conceptually.
difference because,
I mean, it wound up not being nearly as important because the online component was the big thing with NFL 2K1.
yeah,
Um,
so no need for the separate screen,
right.
but
It kind of de-invented itself at the same time, but
yeah. But I know where he's coming from because him and I used to play cyberball all the time with
mhm,
a bunch of buddies almost every week for
yeah,
over a year.
mhm,
Great times.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't
so
know. I'm genuinely torn by that question, but I think at the end of the day,
mhm.
given the entire library on all of this, particularly on their own systems, I would probably have to go with Sega. But
I
that's
think that's a
hard.
great choice
Yeah.
because I would not cry if I ended up, sticking with Sega
Right.
over Nintendo because they're
Right.
also very great on their own right.
And I think at this point, like, I love the Nintendo classics to pieces, but like, I have spent my time with them to this point. You know what I mean? So if
Yeah.
there's more unexplored country for me there, then that might be the better choice. Um, Now, with regard to third party companies,
Mhm.
I've also thought about this a lot. And
I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this one.
I think my choice is kind of like the photo negative of yours.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean Konami.
Oh,
Now,
I'm surprised you said Konami. I thought you were gonna say Namco.
n- again, that's another one that's way up there for me, particularly if we're talking about like the 32-bit era forward.
Yeah, that's why I
But
thought of you as a
yeah,
Namco guy.
and I love them to pieces. And really, like, to me, like the PlayStation 1 is almost more their system than anyone else's.
Oh, yeah. We all know that.
Um, yeah. But, um, it's strange that Konami also made a lot of arcade games for a long time. And yet, most of the arcade versions of those games are not the best iterations of those games. It's like a
Hmm.
lot of times those games were the prototypes for games that wound up becoming much better despite the limitations of the NES and the Super NES. I have such a profound appreciation when I sit down and just play like the original Castlevania. When
Yeah.
I think of like how many different things that game was doing, like it was a really tight action platformer, and despite being hard, it was actually overwhelmingly fair because of how predictable and precise all the patterns are.
It kinda
Um,
was until you got to the bats.
the bats are assholes.
I know! They are!
But still, like, it's still doable. You know what I mean? Um, so I don't know, man. Like between that and just their unbelievable output on the Super Famicom, I mean, Contra 3, Legend of Mystical Ninja, which, you've got the other Goemon games for the system in Japan, which are just masterful. You had fantastic ports of Parodius and Pop and Twinbee. Um, I don't know. Like, I find myself, I've got the Mister basically loaded up. And when I sit down and I explore those games, I'm just continually blown away by the sprite work, the unbelievable palette, and just how good they were at composing music for those pieces of hardware. Like,
Well, yeah.
or Capcom excelled so well at things in the arcade, and it was almost like that's kind of where their heart was. And with a lot of the home ports, like they would do a pretty good job with them, but they sort of knew what they were up against. And I mean, really, the killer thing was just the limited colors and the, you know, crappier resolution.
Hmm.
when you got those games at home. But with Konami, I really feel like they were so good at embracing those limitations and still delivering something absolutely memorable that I don't know, man. Between 8 and 16-bit Konami, I think I could play those games until the day I die.
Yeah, and I would imagine because you love shooters, and Gradius is one of the best shooters of all time.
Yeah.
You would be happy as a clam just sticking
Love the
with
Gradius
Konami.
games, love Axelay.
Paradise.
Um,
Gyrus?
yeah, Gyrus. Gyrus
Gyrus,
is good
sorry,
shit too,
Gyrus.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that game, but
Yeah.
I know you played that a lot too. So
Yep.
Time Pilot,
Played
don't
a
forget Time Pilot.
Yeah. Time Pilot is that was one of the first things I ever loved in that game. It's just good.
Yeah, and Konami is a great choice. The only drawback is that recently, they don't really
Well,
have
that's the thing. I
anything
mean,
to show.
fundamentally, they don't really exist in the same state that they did.
Yeah, it's a shame.
It's more of a holding company for all those IPs.
It's a pachinko company.
Yeah. And it's a bummer because they absolutely were one of the most innovative game studios on the planet.
They were.
Yeah.
They still have some, very scant few titles that are still popular in Japan, like the Momotaro series. I don't know if you heard about that game, but it's like a board game. Super
Mhm.
popular in Japan.
Yeah.
After a dispute with I guess the creator of the series, they got back together and they've been making Nintendo Switch games again, and that's always selling out the wazoo in Japan.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, no Silent Hill. Forget about Metal Gear unless you're interested in the possible Solid 3 remake that another company, I guess, maybe under the wing of Konami will
Mhm.
bring out, and who knows what
Well, I
else.
mean, I don't know if you played any of Blue Point's other games, but
Hmm.
they really do an incredible job of sort of navigating that which made a game really, really good and keeping the spirit of that, but then also going, okay, what were the problems with it? You know what I mean?
Are they the ones making the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake, or
It's heavily
possibly?
rumored that they are.
Uh,
Nobody's confirmed it in stone yet, but it's heavily rumored that that's the thing that they're working on.
well, if the other rumors are true and Kojima will also be helping or consulting at least, I think
Yeah.
it would be pretty good. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I would look forward to
No.
it.
I would
But
I would imagine that would come out really, really nicely, especially considering the quality of their other work.
yeah, and hopefully they can do that and kind of bury you know, the past with, what happened, what, 5, 10 years before with the kind
I
of
mean, that
pushing out
whole
of
thing
Kojima.
just still blows my mind
It
that
does.
you could have somebody who was so absolutely integral to the success of Konami, particularly from the 32-bit age onward. I mean,
You pushed him
both
out the door.
right.
It's
I mean, both
terrible.
he and Igarashi,
Yeah.
were given the heave ho, and those guys were such a bedrock of that company's success. So I don't know, man. It's always a bummer when you get people in charge of something that have a say over creators and just no real stake in what was laid down before, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of the reports on Konami being a really black company where in terms of having really draconian types of rules, like people being videoed, you know,
Yeah.
having so many cameras observing exactly what they're doing at every given moment, things like that,
Mhm.
making it really hard to work under those conditions. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of people left. Hopefully, the management over there, the higher ups, hopefully they reshuffled them, and hopefully they'll get back to what made them great is going back to the titles that made them what they are. and hopefully exploring new titles, new possibilities, and becoming a force again. Because yeah, they're obviously a shadow of what they used to be now.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the hoping.
Yeah,
But
it
good
would be nice
choice.
to see that. I mean, it would be lovely to see them make a comeback, but like,
Yeah.
this century has not been particularly kind to a lot of Japanese developers
Yeah.
that
But
we know and love. So
for me, I'm thankful that Capcom is still around, Namco is still around,
mhm.
Konami, That was the Triforce for me, though.
Yeah,
Capcom, Konami, Namco.
yeah,
So I'm thankful that for them.
yeah.
They made me who I am right now.
Also, a dark horse in that. I always think about like when a company had like a really strange and interesting and super creative period. Like it was wild to see Square do what they did on the PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
When you think
It
about like Einhander, Tobal 1 and 2, like
Oh, if they
they were making
remade
some
Tobal 1 and 2, that would be
I'm just
so
saying like they
nice.
made some really interesting, games and genres that they were not well known for, you
Yeah.
know. Um
They took
yeah, I don't know.
risks, but
Yep.
they were quite successful and geez, who's gonna argue that they're one of the best RPG creators of all time?
Yeah. Yeah.
And luckily, hopefully those rumors are true about Chrono Cross being remade.
Yeah.
Hopefully that happens because both of us love Chrono Trigger,
Yep.
and I
I
didn't
never
get to
actually
play Chrono
spent any
Cross.
time with Chrono
Me
Cross.
neither.
And I think,
I would love to play it if I
yeah,
could.
a lot of it had to do with the fact that when I found out that it essentially wasn't terribly related to that story,
It was very remotely related from what I understand, yeah.
right? It was more about like kind of some themes were mirrored, but it wasn't really connected to that narrative. And so I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it would
It
be
definitely has
interesting.
its fans out there, though.
It had nice music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just one of those things. Too many games, never enough time.
Yeah. I wish I
And
could
speaking
retire
of
right now.
which,
Play games. Just play games for a living. I want to be on Twitch 24/7 playing my backlog of games, getting paid for it. That would be
um,
nice.
you're just gonna have to up your time in the hot tub, mister.
Oh man, is that
You're
what I
gonna
need
have
to
to
do to get
start
the
churning out that
viewers?
content, Ed.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But,
find your inner amaranth.
I got to go to the gym.
Yeah,
But anyways, yes. That would be nice
right.
just to play video games a lot more than right now and not worry about, feeling guilty about sinking your time uh onto something that's not as productive as what we got to do for our lives, unfortunately.
Very true.
Yeah.
So I believe we are in shouting distance of the end of this episode of Oh God, It Hurts.
Oh God, it
Um,
hurts.
once again, it was fantastic for all of you to spend a little bit of time with a couple of old gamers catching up across the Pacific Ocean. If you enjoyed this, you should definitely check out some of the other offerings right here on the Ruminations Radio Network. I am JJJ, the Six Button Samurai.
And my name is GameAgentET. Please look me up on Twitter and Instagram.
Yep. And you can also find our Oh God It Hurts account at Oh God It Hurts on Instagram as well.
Yep, with the HZ. HZ.
Yep. HZ.
And you can look us up on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Yep.
Please rate and subscribe.
Rate, subscribe, like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Thanks again for spending time with us. Ed, I look forward to talking with you again, my friend.
Yep. Stay fresh.
Hey, this is Charlie, Triple C, from Brevity Box, a new and interesting podcast from the Ruminations Radio Network. If you're a fan of podcasts, we have a lot of great content to offer. Come check out our diverse group of podcasts and hosts at ruminationsradionetwork.com.